How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Real Talk with the Hunters. I am your host, Martino Picariello, joined by my co-host,
Nick Giganti.
and I'm here with a good friend, an even better person, Jordan Katz. Jordan, welcome to the podcast.
How's it going? Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Just a little background on Jordan. Jordan is the owner of Dime Properties. It's a development and management company in the city. They do incredible work in grade A neighborhoods. Is that safe to say, Jordan? It's all grade A neighborhoods?
Yeah, predominantly South Philly, but, spread our wings to Fishtown and Fairmount and some other neighborhoods too. So,
Which I think is great. A lot of people just kind of stick to one spot, but you're always looking to push the boundaries and find ways to make deals, which is what we all are looking to do. But Jordan's been in the business for 10 years now. He's seen a few different markets. He's seen a lot of different deals. He's been part of so many different deals. So just really excited to have him on and pick his brain. So welcome to the podcast, Jordan.
I appreciate you guys having me and illustrious host here. So I'm excited to be here.
I appreciate it, man.
To say the least.
Yeah, we're actually in a room here where we used to meet every Wednesday morning. It was 8 a.m. and it was for role play. And if you're an agent watching this or any kind of salesperson and you do script practice, you know what that's like. Jordan was one of our leaders of that meeting, and we actually ended up, kind of turning it into a therapy session after a couple of weeks. And we all realized it was more about talking about the challenges we were going through and talking about the wins we had and just trying to piece together deals. So role plays slowly turned to therapy, which turned into masterminding. And now being able to share this openly with you guys, I think is so valuable. So thanks for tuning in. Jordan, first thing is just take us to the beginning. Take us back to when it all first started.
So I grew up in Bucks County, so kind of native to Philly, grew up living outside of Philadelphia. I had a finance degree from Penn State. So actually, I knew of Jim Roche, but never met him in school. I knew his wife, Dana, from a distance, but at Penn State, you kind of know of everyone, but you don't know anybody. So, so grew, I had a finance degree from Penn State. I graduated in 2009, which was the financial collapse. So fortunately for me, I interned at Goldman Sachs. So I did the Wall Street thing for a few summers and was able to parlay that into a job, which at the time didn't know if it was what I wanted to do or not, but it was a job when nobody could get a job, and got to live in New York City. A lot of my college roommates went there. So
What part of New York?
we were living first I lived in Soho for a little bit. We ended up crossing the river. I lived in Hoboken for a while, but I worked on Wall Street, like financial district. And it was cool. I was doing back office stuff. I wasn't really trading or an iBanker, but still working probably 60 hours a week. So,
Right. Are you learning a lot from your, superiors at that point and just kind of soaking things up? And
yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think when you're that young, I was in my early 20s, an analyst. It was really just kind of following instructions and showing that you could listen and then implement. But very early on at that job, literally day one, I sat down, first day of the internship. Like I said, I parlayed it into a full-time job, but first day of my job, I was like, God, this sucks. Corporate America, it's brutal. So I had known very early on that I really didn't want to work for somebody else, but it's hard in a market where jobs are scarce and you need money. And so I kind of had a goal with that initial job to do it for 2 years. And if you look, I literally was there for 2 years on the dot.
24 months, not even a day over that.
Exactly.
I love that. And Nick, you kind of were through that time too. You had a corporate America job.
Yeah, I had a corporate America job, and like Jordan alluded to, it's rough. I mean, I personally speaking, I took it personal that you're just very replaceable. You'd see those people that would get let go or quit, and it was just Joe is replaced by Cindy. And it's well, what happened to Joe? Don't worry about Joe anymore. It's Cindy now, and it's just one person's gone, next person's in. And you just feel the bigger the company, the less impact you have on it. And that was really, and ultimately it was just, I wanted to create something for myself. You know what I mean? And I think that was the beauty of and why I just went into real estate. It was and I was, I came from a middle-class family. So it was really a sink or swim situation. I know you're kind of the same situation as well,
And for me too, it was I saw that. I actually got to see around the layoffs while I was there, which was, I was so young and I wasn't getting paid a lot. So I knew I wasn't getting laid off, but
you probably wanted to get laid off.
I definitely did. But to see these people who have been there 8 years, 10 years, and one day somebody taps them on the shoulder and they're out. That was really scary. And then also for me, it was just the idea of like, okay, it's 3:00 on a Friday. I finished my work. I wanted to go to the beach or whatever it was. And I knew I had to like ask permission to leave. And not only that, like I was afraid to do it. It was frowned upon. So for me, just having the flexibility now as an entrepreneur to like kind of call my own shots and run my schedule is like, you cannot put a dollar amount on that.
I've never been in corporate America myself. I did some leasing for a property management company, but still flexible hours. And from like everything that I'm hearing from you guys and then from my experience is like when you're in the corporate America structure, you feel like you're a piece of a machine, right? Versus being an entrepreneur, you get to build the machine, you get to tweak the machine, right? Am I hearing that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I will always say it. It's like, I hated it so much that it forced me to like you don't know what you want until you go through the things that you don't want and that are really shitty. Because it's like, if my job was even half of what it was, meaning like I liked it somewhat, I might have kept doing it and I wouldn't be in the position I'm in now. So it's like, for all those people that are out there that are in a bad situation, it's like that bad situation could be the catalyst to propel you forward, to be that, fuck it, I'm just going to do what I want to do because I definitely don't want to do this. You know what I mean?
And it's interesting you say that because like at times I'm always envious of someone like you who's like, you know, you kind of started selling at a really young age out of school. But there was definitely for me, like career wise, I did another 5 years after New York. I moved back to Philly, worked for a big commercial REIT. And don't get me wrong, it was a fantastic job, amazing company, learned a ton. But again, like that freedom, I just didn't have it. So I did benefit because I almost like career wise, like hit rock bottom of like, I can't do this much longer, you know? And it was a little bit just soul sucking. So it was very freeing when I quit my job. That was 2017 and been an entrepreneur ever since. So
the scary jump. What was the biggest challenge that you faced kind of getting into real estate investing? Obviously starting your own portfolio and just kind of creating relationships, which you're so good at. Yeah. What was that biggest hurdle for you to get over?
Really the hurdle to leave corporate America, right? Leave a steady paycheck and just a guaranteed steady income every week.
What gave you the confidence to do that?
So for me, my story is basically I moved back to Philly in 2012 after doing a few years in New York. And then, so I worked for a company called Liberty Property Trust. They were a huge REIT, started out in Malvern, and then they went nationwide. So I was really helping the company. We were buying warehouses all over the country and selling older vintage, like suburban office product, which was really cool, right? Like we did a portfolio sale of over $1 billion of office product. And we were buying, you know, $50 million warehouses in the Carolinas or Florida or wherever it was, right? So again, it was really cool. I was writing big LOIs and big offers, but eventually after so many repetitions, it just kind of lost its luster.
Yeah.
So while I was at that job, I kind of just started like really educating myself, reading a lot of books. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Always a book that you've told me to read. For anyone out there, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I still have to read it myself.
It's my Bible. I read it like at least once a year. And it's not just a real estate investing book. There's a little bit on real estate, but it's just a book on financial freedom and how to basically build assets and shed liabilities to eventually control your own destiny financially, you know? So read that in college, started getting into some, you know, HGTV, all that bullshit. And then really just like set out a goal while I was still at my job. Like, hey, you know, my lease is ended next summer and I'm going to try to buy a house instead of renting somewhere else. So bought my first place in Point Breeze in 2014.
Shout out Point Breeze.
Point Breeze, baby.
Crazy.
But yeah, that hurdle of so I had bought 3 to 5 properties before I left my full-time job. So it kind of got acclimated, but again, it took me really 2 years to leave my job. So it wasn't something that I was just like, I'm going to do this next week and did it. It was very slow. I kept delaying it. I was like, all right, I'm going to leave by Christmas. And then it got extended out to Memorial Day. Then it was Labor Day. Finally ripped the Band-Aid off and there was no turning back. So many sleepless nights making that decision. Fortunately, my girlfriend at the time, she's now my wife, she was fully on board and knew we were both taking a risk together, you know? So
shout out Jules. She's incredible. She's your partner in the business, right?
Yeah. So my wife now, she left corporate America 2 years ago, right after we had our second kid.
What's she doing again?
She worked for, it's called Free People. It's owned by Urban Outfitters. So actually a really cool job. She loved it too, right? Like very creative. But again, she just didn't have that flexibility. We had our second son, and you could see like there was limitations on how she could parent, how she could be there for our family. So we kind of put our heads together after I was full time for a few years and said, look, I have a need. So Julie manages all our rentals throughout my whole portfolio. She also manages some of the rentals for me and my partners. We have a few JVs together. She helps with a lot of the design for our flips. And yeah, she's just a supremely important cog in my business. So she's my COO, and couldn't do it without her, honestly.
How many units do you have right now?
So we just actually got one under contract this week that we're going to hold on to, just a single, which is nice because I haven't done a single.
Take a flashback. Yeah.
And it's like a cosmetic rehab. So that's like a really, hopefully easy deal, famous last words. But with that deal, we'll have 50 units under management. So it's my
amazing.
50th.
Yeah, that's a great milestone.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be playing some G Unit for 50, but yeah. No, so yeah, we have a mix of singles. We started out doing single families, and then kind of elevated to duplexes, triplexes, some small multis. And then since then, I've done some ground up construction with a few partners. I did a 6-unit with Marco on the team.
Marco was on our previous episode, actually, maybe 2 episodes ago at this point.
Yeah,
because we had Miss Pennsylvania.
Talk about the first house, because that's a pretty funny story. The one on 19th Street.
Yeah,
that was the house that was your first purchase,
first ever.
Yeah, and just like you fixing it up, I found that to be, again, like for anybody that's like trying to get into it and wants to buy their first house, maybe you could shed some light on what you should and shouldn't do.
No doubt.
Yeah, and also how you bought it financially maybe would help, just to kind of get an idea of that.
So before we even get into that house, right, I think something important that I learned from like a lot of these books was like, look, I don't live cheaply, right? Like I'm not a cheap guy. If we go to the bar, I'm buying rounds. I'm shelling out. But yeah, for sure. But you have to kind of be frugal a little bit in life. And that's not to say like, don't enjoy your life. Don't go buy a cup of coffee. But you have to learn how to save money, because you want to do this. Like, regardless if you raise all the money, you're still going to need some sort of nest egg for yourself. So that was something I learned at a very early age, like just stay disciplined financially. I don't drive a super fancy car, and that's not knocking anybody who does. It's just never really been my MO.
I think Nick says it all the time. It's, like,
yeah,
it's not about
within your means.
Live within your means, right? It's not how much you make. It's about how much you keep.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So for me, like I said, I was studying the market, and I lived in Passyunk. I knew South Philly somewhat well. And everybody was talking about Point Breeze, like this next up and coming area. This was 2013, 14. So I was like, all right, if this is the area that I can afford a house, shells were going anywhere from 80 grand to 150 grand. So it's still kind of palatable. Then I'm going to study this market and learn it inside and out. So then I just started walking the blocks on the weekends. And, you'd see a block party here or there. You'd meet the neighbors. You'd meet some new, some old. And they would just tell you about the neighborhood, right? Tell you what they bought their house for. They tell you, this neighbor's good, this street's good, yada, yada, yada. So I did that literally guerrilla research on the ground, right?
Guerrilla lead gen. And it's so important in Philadelphia because it's block to block. Anyone who lives here knows how block to block specific it is. So that's probably one of the best things you could do. Just walking.
Totally. So really got acclimated to Point Breeze. It took me about a year of just like studying. And I said this before, like I set up an auto alert on my phone. So anytime a house got listed in Point Breeze or went under contract or closed, I knew about it. And I didn't study that data set, but over time, you get enough emails, kind of get a sense of like, all right, this house for 100, this block, you kind of get it. So I remember I cold called some guy off Craigslist because he had a house that was for sale and it seemed like a decent price. And he's like, oh, I'm really sorry, dude. It sold last week. Gave me a little bit of motivation because I was like, all right, I'm kind of on the right track if he sold it. But he's like, oh, dude, if you checked out this one on 19th at Reed, it just got listed yesterday for 80 grand. I'm like, 80 grand? Oh my God. So I pulled it up on public records. It was 1,300 square feet. It was 16 feet wide, which is wide for Philly.
Yeah.
And I knew right then and there it was a fantastic deal. And it looked like it just needed cosmetic. So I went in to tour it. It was listed with an agent. At my tour, there's probably 15 other groups there. Like crazy. And like, as a newbie, that is so intimidating to see like contractors with flashlights and tape measures. And I'm like, standing there twiddling my thumbs like,
what's going through your head?
Yeah. I mean, I was just terrified, right? But I knew it was a deal. So I called the agent very confidently, and I actually used an agent who I found on Facebook. Not going to name his name because it wasn't a very positive experience. But look, at the end of the day, what happened there, it was so hot and in such demand in this house that they raised the price to 120 without doing anything. So from 80 to 120 before they even took offers. So, you know, my underwriting was telling me it was a deal at 130. So I was like, you know what? People are going to get scared off by this, you know, them just adding 50% to the price. Right. So put in my offer very aggressively with this agent, you know, pretty quick close. I think I said we did an inspection, but it was just for informational purposes. I knew the seller didn't want to fix anything. So
More like a due diligence period.
yeah, just to check it out, make sure there was nothing like terrifying. So ended up buying the house in August of 2014. And I funded it myself. It was like literally every penny I'd saved and, you know, bought the house basically.
So all cash for the purchase and the renovation as well?
Let me try to think back. I should actually know. So I had gotten a mortgage for that property. And I was going to fix it up and then just say, hey, like I was going to live there, honestly. Didn't really know like, would I live there? Would I not? But I wanted to fix up the kitchen. I wanted to fix up the bathroom, make it nice, maybe add central air and call it a day. Right. I got a mortgage on that. And then all the money I'd saved was going to go into renovating the property. But again, it was just going to be cosmetic until I think it's really important. And this is a good lesson here, right? So you need to put it out into the universe, what you're trying to do, right? In life, not just career wise, but in life, right? You want to lose 20 pounds, put it out there, hold yourself accountable. So for me, it was anybody and everybody I could talk to. I was telling them, I'm going to buy a deal this year. I'm going to buy it. So I ran into this guy in Acme and he knows my sister. And he's like, dude, your sister told me you just bought a house. He's like, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a contractor. Like I flip houses. I'd love to come see it. He had a very unique story, but came and looked at it next week. And he was like, dude, this is an amazing shell. It's big. Let's flip this whole thing. You don't want to just do pieces of it. So I said, if you're down to help, I'm down to do it. Literally, I went to work the next week, came home after work one day, and the whole house was demoed. And it was like trash everywhere, insulation, dust everywhere. And I was like, all right, I'm in it now.
No turning back from that point.
I mean, it was so scary. I mean, I don't think I slept for a week, but that is like, what could be more motivating than like, you are there, you spent all your money on this, you have a pool of money saved to renovate it, like go get to fucking work. You know what I mean? And that was it.
That's incredible. And this podcast I listened to, I think his name was Nick Lord. He's an entrepreneur. He created like diapers.com and he was working corporate America too. And the only advice that he gave was jump. If you want to get into it, jump. And he was saying the same thing. Butterflies, want to throw up, can't sleep, right? But he's like, that's how you know you're on the right track because there's no plan B. There's no escape. You're just committed to success and that's it. There's no other option.
What's really funny you say that too. I remember like leading up to putting my offer in on that house, I like couldn't sleep because I was like so excited. I was like, this is the one. I knew it. And it's funny. The lady who was living there, when I eventually bought it, she saw me at closing. She was like, I knew it was going to be you. And all those people, I knew it. But what's crazy is like, I didn't sleep leading up to it. Then they finally accepted my offer. And it took me 48 hours to sign the contract because I was so nervous.
Scared.
Yeah.
I remember same thing. When I bought my first house, I was like, just during the due diligence period, every day on the block, just like looking at it and being like, do I want to, because I was going to live there.
Totally.
On 17th Street.
Yeah, what was your first deal?
My first deal, I was 25 and I bought 1405 South 17th Street in 09 in Point Breeze. So I was 5 years earlier. And that was the same thing with me with like Point Breeze was, and I was still in corporate America when I bought that, but talking about how like Philly changes so block to block, like I looked at it and I was looking at the numbers in Grad Hospital and it was like this massive jump from when you like when you went north on Washington Avenue. So it was like, how is it such a discrepancy? One block, Washington Avenue, a big borderline between Graduate Hospital and Point Breeze. It was like, you didn't need to be that smart to be like, this is where development's kind of pushing. You just had to have the guts to be like, all right, I'm going to buy here and wait it out. I know it's going to happen. And in hindsight, shit, I wish I bought 20 times more. And I brokered a lot of deals. That's where I got my business started, was Point Breeze. But yeah, in hindsight, I wish I invested more. I'm happy I invested what I did, but it was just like one of those areas that you knew it was coming. You know what I mean? And and it's still a hot area. It has its setbacks, and I wish it had more of a commercial presence there. But I feel like the development of like Washington Avenue is really going to fuel that. And what's going on there is insane. So
yeah, we did talk about that last maybe 2 podcasts ago. Just Washington Avenue in general with Marco, just from 1001 all the way up, and then you have obviously Lincoln Square right there. It's just all going to be a catalyst. And once Point Breeze Avenue gets the correct zoning, I think it's a CMX2 zoning. If you get 2.5, it's like the flexibility goes from here to here. And we still have that flexibility right now.
They've been pushing for that for years. And I don't know, like, I don't know if it's ever going to happen.
It really depends. The council person's very influential in that neighborhood. So, yeah, they're definitely against it. But yeah, I mean, Point Breeze has changed greatly. Like that house I bought was right across from the Smith School, which has now turned into 50 apartments plus 20 new townhomes right across the street. So, yeah, I mean, look, in hindsight, but I don't want you guys to think like it was the hardest year of my life when I bought that house. I mean, I was working full time. The guy who was helping me fix it up, he did it out of like the kindness of his heart. I bought him a really nice gift, but fortunately he didn't need to get paid to do it. Right. But we were doing it together. And, while maybe we started out doing 5 days a week, wherever I could help out, eventually it got slower and slower. It took me a year to renovate that house. But like, dude, it was a grind. Like I was waking up at 5 a.m., going to the house, sweeping up in the morning, driving out to my office in Malvern at like 7, showering at the gym, and then driving straight from work back to the house to work on it for a few hours. So,
and that's like the sacrifice. I feel like that
for the first one,
that is always like people that want to start another business. And it's just like, you got to sacrifice in the beginning. Like if you're working a full-time job and you have an idea for something, like you got to get home and you got to work on that idea, and you got to really just like when I first got into real estate, first selling, like I remember the first year I barely took a day off. Maybe it was like Christmas, Thanksgiving, but it was like, I'm not saying I was putting in a 9 to 5 on a Sunday, but I was working every single day.
Yeah. And like you got to do that when you have the time to do it, right? Or the means to, like, could I do that now? I'm 37, probably not, right? 3 kids, but like I was 27, I had no obligations, and I was going to get that house done whether I liked it or not. So sorry, we don't need to talk about this the whole time. Fast forward, I'll tell you the numbers too. I bought the house for 120, put in 50 grand. It appraised for 260, 275 range, right? When we did it. And, when it was all said and done, my wife's like, this house is amazing. We designed it. Let's definitely move in. We moved in and we lived there for 3 years. And my mortgage payment was about $1,000.
Wow. So
amazing.
Today, I mean, fast forward, one thing just on that, I mean, just the ability to see the big picture and not be afraid, even though you were afraid, like I think we're all a little bit afraid at times, but it's just the willingness to never really give up on that goal, that big dream, and sacrifice that or trade that fear of whatever's in front of you for the fear of not fulfilling your true purpose.
Bro. I mean, I just kept saying to myself, like I studied this market for a year and I read all these books and I was like, look, all right, I take this risk and potentially lose all my savings. What's the worst that happens? That sucks.
It's good to think about that though, because I think it makes you feel better, because when the worst case really is like, all right, I'll move back in with my parents. I'm lucky enough to have that.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah, it's worth that risk, I think.
Totally.
Especially before the 3 kids and the marriage comes along. And I'm in that zone right now. So hearing your story is just so impactful for people like me and myself, obviously.
But what I couldn't stomach was looking back in 10 years and being like, God, what if I would have bought it? Just like, what if?
Right. You'd be like, Nick, I should have bought more. I should have bought 10 more.
Yeah, exactly.
I say it all the time. And this isn't just like, hey, if you want to develop, or like, you have to take risks in life, right? If you're a realtor and you want to expand your business, like expand to new markets, try new things, you have to take risks. So I was very fortunate that I did it. Fast forward now, I still own that house. It's a rental.
Yeah. What's it bringing in red now?
So we have had the same tenant since we moved out. They've been there about 6 years.
Wow.
They rent it for about $2,000 a month. Our mortgage payment has gone up a little bit with taxes and insurance, but we make about $800 a month on that house. Not to mention, in the 10 years I've owned it, we've paid down our mortgage greatly, cash flows.
And the appreciation. I'm in Point Breeze now. I'm on 20th and Dickinson. That's right around the corner from my house. I bought a small 2-bedroom, not even 14 wide, for 280.
Yeah,
That's everything you put in. Actually, that's what it was appraised for. You put in just under 200. So
now that
impressive.
house is worth 400, and my mortgage is probably less than half of that.
I think people forget about that all the time. It's a good thing to forget about because you'll never miss it. Once you sell, you're going to see that appreciation. But cash flow is great. But buying in these grade A neighborhoods, and as I mentioned earlier on, Jordan's only in these grade A neighborhoods. And I'll consider Point Breeze maybe B plus because it's not fully there yet, but still an area where you're seeing tons of growth, tons of appreciation. And on top of the cash flow, you're getting this great net worth tick up every year, every hopefully 5 years, you're going to see a really good increase. So something in real estate that people got to think about.
Yeah. And it does say like that's the stepping stone. Like what you said, it's like you put in that work, you increase the value. And that's like, if you want to be in real estate, you have to have the access to money. And that was like the same thing with my first house. It was like, bought the house. Luckily, it was already fixed up, but I was just like so far, I got in there early enough where then it appreciated. I pulled a line of credit off that house, which helped me buy my other lot that I built my next house. And then after that, that's like the hardest part is like, again, if you don't come from like the means to just have a ton of cash, you build that value with your first house and then boom, now you have something to borrow against to get your next one. And then once you get that one, then you build a value. And then the more you have, now you have more instruments to borrow off of. And it's almost like, it's a catalyst for your business.
That's always how I've kind of been. I mean, you mentioned like I did not come from, look, we were middle class. I'm not going to say we were, struggling by any means, but like my parents couldn't just throw me money and say, hey, like go do your thing. Right. I had to figure it out. So I've always borrowed against my own portfolio, my own properties, my own equity. And look, I've raised a little bit of money here and there, made really good returns for my investors. But for the most part, it's all self-sufficient. And you hit it on the head. It's like, not only is this asset now cash flowing, is it appreciating? I get tax benefits as a real estate professional. There's also a way to leverage your equity and then do more and more and more. And that's how you slowly build it. I've always been slow and steady. My first 4 years, I did 4 deals. It was 1 deal a year, very slow. And somebody's like, do you know how long that's going to take you to get rich? But look, you just got to do it, man. And that's how you learn. And some people are more, risk tolerant. They might just go balls to the wall and buy 10 assets at once. I've always been a little bit slower and steadier and methodical. So I never have more than, 5 to 7 deals on my plate at a time. That used to be 1 or 2 deals at a time, and you just evolve and you grow. So
you strike me as someone who is always very in the moment. I don't think you're always where your feet are, at least when I see you. Sometimes maybe, you have 4 things going on at once and I see you for a second, but most of the time, any events we have, you're just very present to
try to be.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think it's important too. Like, I don't know, for me, I always struggled. Like, I love selling too, right? And being a realtor and commiserating with you guys and chatting. But, I always struggle with like setting goals and like, I don't know. It just, for me, it was like the biggest goal for me was just leaving my job, dude, and surviving for the first 2 years.
And honestly, I love that because it's like so many people are attached to this goal or this outcome and they're attached to it so much. If something happens a little off what they thought was going to happen, they're depressed, they're upset, they're anxious. Whereas you, like, you're in the moment, you're in your process. You know that you have, like, let's just go back to this renovation, your first one. You have the property under contract. If it takes 6 months, it takes 8, it takes 12. You're doing the right things. So anxiety, that fear, I just feel like it doesn't get to you as much as maybe someone who's not as aware of their, like, that they're attached to this outcome that just is never really what you think it is. You know?
I mean, definitely had some sleepless nights back in the day. Still do, but it's gotten better, right? And yeah, I never had this goal of like, all right, I want to get to 100 units and then I'm done. Or, I want to make, it was really just keep doing deals that I'm comfortable with and that I have the capacity to do, right? So even this year, I'm not saying, all right, I want to do 12 deals or 50 units or whatever it is. I know I have the capacity to do anywhere from 5 to 10 development deals at a time. And if I have 3 right now, it's like, I better go out and find a fucking flip, or I better go out and find an apartment building to do. So that's always been my mantra. And what's cool is now, whereas I used to be able to afford maybe 2 deals at a time, now I can leverage a little bit more. Maybe I can do 5 or 7 or whatever it was. But it's always been that slow and steady build, you know?
What would you say right now in this current market? How are you finding deals? What are the setbacks? Obviously, we could talk about interest rates, but like, where are you seeing pricing in regards to like construction, that sort of stuff? Like,
Yeah,
how
great
much are you?
question.
Yeah.
Even taking a step back, right? Like back in probably 2017, right when I started, I met this guy, Ethan Giller. Shout out Ethan. He's a G, and he runs under the radar, but he has like hundreds of units, or he did. I think he's since sold a bunch. But anyway, all he told me when I met up with him, he was a mentor for me, was if you find the deals, everything else will fall into place. So you just have to buy the property right. So really, since day one, for my whole decade of my career in real estate, it's been the focus, find the deal and the rest will come together, right? And that's still my mantra. So, you know, I would meet these wholesalers early on that are like, okay, we got this house for 120. And then I would get the contract and it's like, they had it locked up for 80. And I'm like, these guys are making 40 grand. And look, the deal still worked for me. So I still bought it. But I'm like, if these guys are finding it for 80, then I can find it for 80 or 75. You know what I mean? So
How did you go about that?
really pounding the pavement, dude. And that's how I heard of Nick's name in Point Breeze. And, you know, that's how I met Jim. And I just started meeting neighbors, knocking on doors. And then I met a block captain who put me onto a house. The third house I ever bought was a block captain. She called me and she's like, hey, you know, I haven't seen this neighbor in 6 months. And then now their kids are moving stuff out. You might want to write him a letter. So I wrote him a letter, just said, hey, you know, I'm on the block. We own a rental right down the street. Not sure what's going on, but we saw you guys moving some stuff out. We'd love to buy it. They called me back next week and we got it under contract. So
For 80, was it like an 80? Was it like closer to where a wholesaler would have picked it up at?
yeah, I bought it for 88.
Amazing.
And that was my first full renovation.
I mean, just to break that down, like just you putting a little bit of like intent behind what you're doing and then obviously taking action saved you close to $30,000-$40,000.
Yeah, it was probably worth 120. And look, I wasn't trying to rip the sellers off by any means. They were like, you know, we're from out of state. We tried to clear some stuff out. The house is a mess. You know, we want to make X amount of dollars. And I tried to get as close to that as I could.
As long as everyone's happy, I feel like you can never feel bad about picking up a deal.
Totally.
You know, like
some people want that ease of transaction or ease of a buyer who's not going to give them a hard time. And they will discount it for you because they want that ease, you know?
I think it's worth it in some situations.
Yeah, I think the key thing that is what you said. It's like your entrance price. That's what makes a deal a deal.
Totally.
It's if you buy right, that's gonna define your deal.
Totally. So back to your question, Nick, like that's always been my main focus is the deal, right? But you know, these times are really challenging because I've been talking to sellers, some sellers I keep in contact with over a 5-7 year period, right? What they told me they thought their property was worth in 2021, they now think it's worth 30% more, where I know for a fact it's worth 50% less, right? So it's just really hard because a lot of the deals I did were direct to seller and people were making them offers when the market was so hot a few years ago and they see the building going on around them. So they're like, dude, no, but I know the fundamentals, right? So challenges right now for me, I would definitely say like sellers just have unrealistic 2020, 2021 expectations. But there's always going to be somebody who's motivated that needs to sell quickly, you know?
They say it's always the sellers that react the what would be the word? Like last.
Yeah,
basically.
The lag period. Yeah.
You know, the buyers start offering, you know, they get affected by the interest rates. Their offers go down based on like their monthly payments. Then it's the realtors that kind of start seeing what's happening with the buyer pool. And then it's the sellers that are last to react to it. And that has been the biggest struggle right now because it's very hard to tell for someone to, you know, get $1 million offer on their property 3 years ago when the interest rates were basically 3%. And now, you know, people are coming up and trying to offer them 700 for it. They got a 30% drop in value. They're like, no, fuck no, I don't want to sell right now. I want to hold on to it. But it's like, listen, I hate to say it, but we're not going to go back to 3% interest rates. And if we are, then that means that there's something horrible happening in the world, like another pandemic that drove those 3% interest rates. So it's like, we don't want those 3% interest rates back anyway. We saw what it did with inflation. So
we're hitting it on the head and then you compound that with oh, taxes were frozen for a few years because COVID, right? Right. But now they reassess property. So taxes have nearly doubled, if not more. Insurance costs are through the roof, right? There's all these natural disasters.
Yep.
And construction, while it has come down since the peak of COVID, it's not been anywhere near pre-COVID, right? There's still supply chain constraints.
Yeah,
so
the fact you could renovate that house 16 wide, that big for less than $100,000,
yeah,
you'll never
we
see
were
that
paying
again.
for a lot of labor, right? So
Right, that's
that helped.
fortunate.
And we didn't pull permits, but
We'll cut that.
It's
We'll cut
crazy.
that.
The house I built on 20th Street, that corner house, 3,000 square feet. I built that for 365
Wow.
grand. Like, I could never. That would probably be an extra 200. What do you
Definitely,
think?
yeah.
$200,000
probably.
It was just pre-COVID.
And look, I always look at it. There's always kind of three things that dictate the market, and it's access to deals, right? Pricing of deals, pricing of construction, and pricing of financing, right? And it's almost like this wheel of the three things that are intertwined. You look back 2018, 2019, 2020, the financing was incredibly cheap, right? We were getting hard money at a cheap cost. We could do a 30-year fixed loan for an LLC at 4%. That's unheard of, right? So you could get great financing, but you couldn't find great deals, and the construction started going up. Then,
Just for reference, if people haven't been following for that long, what are interest rates now compared to that for a construction loan?
if I did a 30-year fixed loan now in an LLC, it'd be at least 7.5%. And that's probably a point lower than it was 6 months ago. So it was probably 8.5 6 months ago. So there you go. The financing more than doubled, right?
Any perspective, that's a huge deal.
But it's very hard. And I don't think we'll ever see where those three things, construction costs, deal access, and financing costs, will ever all be aligned. One will always be higher, and then it kind of dictates the whole process. But for me, I always just said, like, people would always say, like, oh, Point Breeze is oversaturated. South Philly's so expensive. There's so much competition. People are overpaying. That's motivation for me, dude. Like, I'm like, all right, if they're saying that, then that's even more motivation to find a good deal to kick ass in that market. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's also one thing to say that it's like, what's the opportunity now? When the interest rates were low, everybody was a developer. Everybody, that the market was flooded. They were pushing up pricing. And now it's like, this is kind of like a natural, real estate cyclical. So now it's like kind of the amateurs, the people that were just kind of doing it on the side, we'll get them out of the market and restart it. And now it's like less competition for when things do change, and then it starts up again. But it's like, you got to look at the opportunities right now. And it's kind of the same thing that goes for like real estate professionals. Like, I see it's a hard market right now. It's a hard market. It's stagnant. I think we do a great job of just pounding the pavement, working our asses off, getting leads, getting deals in. But it's like, ultimately, the opportunity for us is there's going to be less people doing it. There's going to be less competition. And for the people that are strong, that get through there, you get through it. It's going to be us, it's going to be.
And I love that you
us
say
for
that,
Tate.
dude, because it's like, for me, I just want to be in the game and top of mind when somebody hears of an opportunity, right? So you don't know how many people over the years have said to me, like, dude, you've been doing this for a decade. Like, why are you still doing single families, right? And not to brag, but like, I can do a single family in my sleep, right? So not in my sleep, but it's work and it's hard work, but I'm so accustomed to that. I have the guys for that it's easy for me. So I'll keep taking those singles and maybe take a risk on a bigger deal while, almost hedging with these smaller deals. And then, when some of these amateurs or a lot of guys who just got in over their heads back out, then I'm still around. And now I'm starting to get calls from contractors who are like, yo, you got anything for me? 5 years ago, I couldn't find a contractor, dude. I had to beg people. Now I'm getting calls from subs like, yo, we need work. What do you got? And fortunately, I have inventory to give them, right? So the pricing's getting better and that helps. But I just want to stay in the mix, right? People think of me and that's it.
What is next for Jordan Katz? What's that next frontier that you want to maybe take a stab at?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, now that we have kind of like this family team, my wife obviously works full time in the business. One day I hope to pass that on to my 3 sons, and hopefully one of the 3 wants to do it.
You better. If not, I'll take it. All right.
Jordan Katz and Company.
That's it, man.
3 sons. I told him he's got to start a construction company, but he said
they're
probably
a little
more.
frail. I don't know.
Maybe an accounting investment company.
No, but I mean, that's our goal, is to like, again, like just slowly continue to build this. And like I said, my biggest deal to date was a 9-unit. Actually, I don't know if I said that. I did that with a partner.
Talk more about the development side. Like, how's that been so far? I mean, how many units have you developed at this point?
So I've done a few new construction deals. First new construction I ever did was a house, single family in Passyunk. Halfway through it, was actually walking it with Marco. It was like framed up, and he was like, dude, could you imagine living here? And it was like, ding. Like, literally, it was like, no, I never thought about it, but I could. This house is amazing. I lived 3 blocks away, but then I was like, wait, I've been in my house 2 years, my previous house. So I could sell this and not pay taxes instead of paying taxes on the new one, upgrade my house and build it exactly how I wanted. So that's what I did. It was my first new construction. So I'm like, as you can tell, like I'm a big believer of like, do it for yourself first, right? So to answer your question, like one of the next frontiers, we're thinking about moving to the burbs. I really want to either build a house out there from the ground up or rehab something. And what better way to like hedge that risk a little bit instead of flipping it than to do it for myself, do it for my family. And if we like it, maybe we'll start doing some more work in the burbs, but it's a perfect way to try, right?
And that's great. I think it's something that, I mean, it's so hot out there. It's like, you really can't, if you buy right, like we talked about, yeah, it's hard to think that there's not going to be demand for someone who wants that property. Would it be a flip or a rental for you? Because I know you typically burr, right?
Out in the burbs?
Yeah.
I think for us, like we would try to move to the first one, and then we'd probably sell out there just because the price point's so high.
Right. You can get, I mean, out in the main line, if you have like a 5,000 square foot home, and don't get me wrong, it's a hard parcel to find.
For sure.
But you're looking at 1.5 plus, sometimes 2, depending on the school district. So definitely some money to be made.
I will say this. I have the hunters team hunting for my house.
We're always hunting.
The Katz Mansion. That's what Phil Maizano calls it, Katz Manor. So we're hunting, but I'm confident that the team will find it. And again, it's all about finding the deal, right? So all we got, and everybody's telling me you're never going to find a house on the main line if that's where you want to go, right? Never. And all I got to do is find one and I will find it.
That's it. I love the manifest piece. I think that's a huge takeaway for me. Just keep putting it out there. Keep putting it out there. It's bound to find its way back to you. Like that contractor, if you didn't have him, who knows where that deal goes? And it's just all about being very vocal about it, putting it out.
Yeah. So back to your question of just like where I want to grow the development stuff. So I have built, a few singles. Marco and I partnered on a 6-unit, which was land that we actually got a variance on. It was zoned for single family. We spent 2 years getting that land rezoned, which was a lot of work, but a lot of reward, right? So we fortunately bought that for a really good number. We're able to hire a contract. We hired Zados Construction. They were amazing. And I kind of learned from them of like how they built that. And then the most recent big deal I did was a 9-unit in Queen Village with my partner, Justin Chava.
That was a beautiful piece.
It's a beautiful
great location.
Piece. Great location.
Great location.
Phil Maizano, again, he found the deal. We were able to upzone it. So we actually are offering one low income unit, which is really cool. And that's a deal like hopefully we can hold that for a very long time. And, we've had a lot of applicants there. I don't think we've seen a credit score under 700. It's great tenants, great area. But what we learned, here's a really cool, quick story. I got that under contract February of 22, and it was just me. Justin wasn't involved yet. And literally from February, I had 90 days to close to May. I think rates jumped like 150 basis points. So from 4% to 5.5%. And we knew they were continuously going up. So the banks that I was talking to fund the deal in February, they were like salivating. In March, they were like, maybe. In April, they were like, you need to send us more documentation. We're really nervous. So, kind of just aligned. Justin and I were friends for years. He has a really similar mindset to me, really similar portfolio. And we've been talking about doing something. And I was like, dude, you know what? I have this one. Would you want to potentially do it? And based on the market changes, even in those 90 days, it wasn't a home run. But Justin and I were like, dude, let's do it together, bounce ideas off each other. And we ended up really GCing it ourselves. And that's how we were able to save money to get the cost down and make the deal work,
Yeah. What was your, I think that's so important to partner up with people who are aligned in what you want to do. The alignment is number one. What kind of responsibilities were you happy to take on? And what kind of responsibilities did you want to delegate to him to kind of manage on his end?
Amazing question. So for me, I had always kind of known my limitations, right? Like I've done a lot of rehabs. The only time I ever swung a hammer was back on 19th Street. My hands were literally bleeding, so never again.
Office guy doing blue collar work.
This is my kind of work. But no, so I kind of knew, like, I knew construction, but I didn't know the ins and outs of how windows should be flashed or certain, lumber sizes, whatever. I never got into the details of that. My mantra was always find a good enough deal where I could hire a good enough contractor that handles that heavy lifting, right? With Justin, I obviously brought that deal on American Street in Quee Village. I already had the bank lined up. Insurance was in place. So I was already kind of doing that. He's great at that too, don't get me wrong. But he was a little more well-versed in the construction. So we kind of said, we're going to do everything together. We're going to find the subs together. But Justin was going to be a little more day-to-day on site. And I was more the financial, the draws, brought the deal, brought the bank, and now what's cool too is Julie helps with the leasing there. So Julie's doing the leasing and management, and it's kind of all in-house, which is so cool.
It's an amazing team you have.
Yeah.
Right? And for anyone watching, who wants to get into this, what's one piece of advice you give them about building that team and finding the right people?
Oh man, I could give so much.
It's a tough one because I'm in this business now for going on 7 years. I was in leasing before, and then I got my sales license 4 years ago. And it's like, man, you meet so many awesome people, and then you meet so many people that you're like, I'll never talk to you again. But out of the awesome people, how do you know who you want to do business with?
It's a great question. Yeah. So I think for me, I keep dropping Phil's name, right? But he's such a good example.
Shout out Phil. Phil's the man. We got to give him some love. Yeah.
Phil's the man, right? But Phil, I met Phil. He cold called me off my Instagram, not knowing I was friends with Nick, not knowing I was friends with Jim. And dude, when I get a lot of cold calls now because I own a good amount of property, and I was such an asshole to him. I just remember being like, what do you want, dude? Like literally. And I could just tell in his voice and his confidence, and he knew the right things to say, right? He was like, dude, I've seen your portfolio. I see what you're doing in South Philly. Like, he was hyping me up, right? Like selling me. And
people love recognition. I will say that if you're in sales, give them recognition. They will listen. Yeah,
that's it. So not only that though, he was dropping names of, I work with Colin and Rob. I know other people. Like, he just said all the right things. And then it was like, oh wow, I was pretty impressed by this kid. A week later, he calls me with a deal, right? What did I always say? You find the deal, the rest is history, right?
I actually see Phil right here. Let me see.
Oh shit. So yeah, little special guest here, dude.
Impromptu guest.
I was saying nice things about him, He's coming in. There he is, dude. My deal boss.
Let's go. There he is. The man, the man.
For the people. We're live.
Yeah, we're live.
We're live? Are we really? I don't know what to say. I'm a little nervous.
We're talking about how you guys first met, that initial cold call. Do you remember that cold call? What was that like for you on your end?
Yeah, that's a story. How do I summarize it? I called Jordan off of Instagram. Wasn't the nicest guy to start with. Yeah. Until I told him, I was like, I'll bring you deals. And he's like, yeah, all right. I think I called him like 3 days later. It was actually something decent.
What I just said.
Did you remember that deal?
I don't think so. No. Our first one was American Street.
Yeah.
We were just talking about that deal. It's a beautiful deal. What was it like on the acquisition side for you when you first saw that opportunity? Do you remember what that was like?
Oh, yeah, dude. Easiest buyer in the world. I mean, if you can find something on the MLS, whether it's on or off market, I don't care where it's at. If you can just identify it, quick back of the napkin math of we can build there, what the zoning is, what the price is, and, with the stabilized like yield on costs and stuff like that, and tell him it's in his area.
You're actually, what was cool about that deal too, though, is it was on the MLS, like Phil said. So this was marketed to everybody. This was a duplex, right? And Phil calls me and he's like, dude, this thing is zoned for multi. And I think you could do 6 by right. So immediately I'm going on, researching it. And then I go to Google Earth and I just see green behind the property. And the backyard was like 70 feet long. So Phil had basically found something that everybody else couldn't find, right? It took a little while for them to accept offers. So by that time, other people were onto it. But we were competing with like a lot of friends. Fortunately for all of them, seriously, everybody was going to condo those units. And they would have got crushed because the market would have dipped greatly. So luckily, I bought it with the intent to rent it. Justin and I are rental guys first. And it's been an awesome, awesome deal. And it's really cool now. Like, we spent some extra money on the architecture. We worked with Gnome Architects, who are like one of the best architects in the city.
Yeah, Gnome is going to be on.
Looking forward to having Gabe on.
I was just texting Gabe today.
So they're amazing in multiple areas. But they knew the zoning really well. And they also designed this incredible building to where now like there's articles being written up about it. There's people coming up to me being like, dude, this is like such a good thing for the neighborhood. How good does that feel? You know, you're like leaving your mark on the city. So
just to go back to the process piece of it, it's like just enjoying that whole process and obviously being like very attentive to details and having a partner who's very on site. Like you're not doing it really, don't get me wrong. Is the money there for sure? But it's like you're doing it because you enjoy doing it. Yeah. And I just think a lot of people don't focus on the process of it. They're just thinking about the result. So,
well, I got this man to thank for it. So
thank you, Phil.
I actually got that deal in Disney World. We were actually walking to the park and I was checking my
just
phone.
talking about hard work.
I was. No, seriously. But if you're like deal hunter or even like for Jordan, because he's busy, but a lot of people wait for that 9 to 5. Like, oh, I'll be in the office and like, you know, I'll look at it tonight. It's like, no, dude, like pull over on the side of the road and look at the deal if it makes sense.
He was on the log flume calling me.
Always a pleasure, Phil. I saw him out of the corner of my eye and I knew we were talking about him. I said we had to get
nice
him in.
cameo.
Very happy we brought him in. And you guys have met him on the first initial episode when we introduced the hunters. Yeah, guys in the Air Force for 4 years, only 4 years.
Wrote a book. Donated all the profits to charity. I mean, great kid.
We want to have him on more regularly as a co-host, hopefully. But I mean, Jordan, any like last remarks? I mean, this has been a huge, just a lot of knowledge for me. It's been great just having a conversation and kind of just openly discussing what you're seeing. Any last remarks for the people watching?
No, I mean, look. Earlier we talked about taking a risk, and I'm a huge believer in that. But it's also, doing business the right way and put yourself around the right type of people. I have a good reputation in Philly. I know that for a fact because I do business the right way, right? And that's not just not screwing somebody over. That's really, caring about what I'm produced, like what I'm putting out there, my buildings, my tenants, right? Like I could be a slumlord, but I'm not. It feels better to take care of my tenants and fix things. And, this is not a plug for the Hunters Rarity team, but the reason I joined this team, I don't sell much, right? So it's like, why join the team, right? When I wanted to put myself around people like you and Phil and Nick, where I can get mentorship from one end of guys who've done it longer than me, but then I got the younger guys under me who help me find deals and help me motivated and, they keep me hungry, right? It keeps me humble. So, I'm fortunate to be around such a great team here. I have great partners and Justin and my wife and Marco and all those things. And look, it's a great business. There's a million ways you can make money in real estate and just snipe. You got to stay focused and really focus in on what you want to do and just hit the ground running.
Well, what's that saying that you have? It's day one or
one day, baby.
Yeah.
And it's like, I read this little meme that was like day one or one day. And you think about it, it's like, am I going to start tomorrow and that's day one of my journey? Or, am I going to say one day, maybe I'll do it? And, no turning back, man. Once you go, solve the next problem and on to the next one. There's always going to be a problem to fix.
Now you're on day 15,000 and you're doing great. 50 units. Man, Jordan, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, guys, if you are liking the content that Nick and I are putting out and the people we have on, like and subscribe down below.
Yeah, like and subscribe. We're going to be putting this out on a weekly basis. So hope you get a lot out of this. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah, and follow Hunters and Rarity on Instagram. We got some good content there.
Great content.
All right, guys, take care.